Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to utilize the cloth, gravity, and collision simulation tools here in Autodesk Maya. This can add a lot to a scene, such as a tablecloth or blanket on your bed or whatever scene you're modeling, including maybe even a flag waving outside, just as a few examples to name. And it can really add a ton of visuals to your scene. So let's just go ahead and get started. I'll run through some of the settings also with you, and I'm going to start by creating a poly cube. That's it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a poly plane, and I'm just going to drag that one up. And for purpose of this lab, I'm not going to have it them both too far apart so it doesn't have as many calculations to run. So I'm going to go ahead and just scale this one a little bit larger. And the next thing I need to do is I need to make sure that my polyplane has enough geometry in order to look like a visual representation of, in this case, maybe a tablecloth or a blanket I'm draping over something, or a towel. And it also needs the geometry in order to calculate the collisions it's going to make with this cube. Now the way it works is it doesn't run by faces, it runs by vertices. So it's going to calculate many calculations at a time. This vertice and every other vertice around it, every single one, and every single vertice here as it falls and makes contact. So it uses quite a bit of computing power. It shouldn't slow down your system too much. I'm running a screen capture software which uses a lot of CPU power for this computer anyway, while I'm running these calculations here. So my system will probably slow down in the video. Yours shouldn't be too bad though. Anyway, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select my polyplane and add geometry to it. I don't want to add too much because I don't want this to slow down too much or affect the quality of the video or interrupt perhaps some of the audio in the video as I do this. So I'm going to keep it relatively small, but in an actual scene I'd probably go as high as going to 100 by 100 for something like this. And you know, depending on what I was trying to represent, may depend on how many polygons I add to this. This should be more than enough, and it should be able to add a pretty good visual quality to represent a cloth in this case. Now I'm going to switch to, I'm already in my FX tab, but I'm going to switch to my FX tab, and that's going to change all of my menu commands up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my polyplane. I'm going to go to nCloth, and if you're in the Effects tab, you'll see it over here. This is the nCloth. For whatever reason, when I hover over it, the name doesn't pop up. However, you'll notice if I go to nCloth, you'll see the little icon here, and the t-shirt with the plus sign is Create nCloth. Now, the next thing we need to do, it automatically starts to create, it gives you the nCloth shape, it gives you the nucleus, which is here, and the nucleus is what covers or controls the gravity, the rate of speed at which it falls, so the gravity could be higher, lower, the direction of the gravity. In this case we want it to be falling down, so y is -1. However, if you had a you know, if you were doing something like a scene in Doctor Strange, you might switch this to be, you know, +1 and this 0, so the direction's going this way with all those different types of scenes in that film. Another thing is we have the air density. We can change the density of the air, the wind speed, wind direction, wind noise, and then that's really the core of what the nucleus controls. The nCloth itself, you can run all types of different types of collisions, collision strength, collision flag, it goes on. You can have it bounce, so it could be like a sort of bouncy material, friction, so it stays on it. If it has a low friction, it'll slide off. They even have a stickiness one here, and you can go on and mess around with a lot of force field generation. We are not going to get into that, but we're going to stick with the just the default settings. But if you want to go ahead and mess around with it, feel free. They're not required in this particular lab. Now, I've already created this as an nCloth. Now I need to go ahead and I need to create this as a collision. So for that nCloth, so I'm going to hit play, and you're going to see, just because that's an nCloth and it's falling, it doesn't make collision with this. And the reason is because we haven't set this cloth to collide with this cube. So this cloth has no idea that this is in the scene. The Nucleus or the nCloth does not recognize this as even an object in the scene to collide with. So it's just going to run straight through. Even though there's an object there, it doesn't know it's there. That may sound a little confusing, but we need to basically tell this polyplane to collide with this polycube. Alright, and how you do that is we select our nCloth or our polyplane, and then we're going to shift select our cube. Now from here I'm going to go up to nCloth, and I'm going to do create passive collider. You'll see there's a t-shirt with a little arrow wrapping around it, this icon right here. So we're going to create passive collider. So this is going to tell this cloth, this polyplane, that we want it to be able to collide with this cube. And I'm going to go create passive collider. Now from this point, I'm not going to mess around with any of the settings. I just am going to hit play. Just as a reminder, right click on your play button, go to, if you haven't done this already, playback speed. You can do real time, you can do play every frame, play every frame max real time. I'm going to try that one only because I am running extra software right now, so hopefully that might help a little bit, but otherwise normally I would just have it as real time. I'm going to hit play, and you'll see that the cloth really does drape right around it. Now with more polygons, the greater quality of cloth you get. But you see what happens. I'm going to hit play one more time just to show you. And you start to get some really cool looking cloth effects. Now, just an FYI, if you have an object that you modeled, alright, and you want to run a cloth over it, let's just say you wanted a sort of some type of drape over your couch or something that you modeled, just as an example. When you model that couch, okay, you need to make sure that that is a closed object, even if you have multiple objects on it, so each couch cushion is a separate object, and the couch, the rest of the couch itself is another object, and you want it to collide with all those things. That's great, but it can easily glitch out, perhaps even crash the software, if you do not have all of your objects as closed objects, because it relies heavily on the vertices of the objects in order to calculate the collisions it needs to display the cloth draping over something. Just an FYI. So if you ever run into that issue, your first way to troubleshoot that is to make sure your object is totally closed. Okay, that means having your vertices all merged together properly. If you want to go ahead and play around with this is a lot of fun, this lab. But this is all requiring you to do. So just submit a JPEG of this image of your cloth draped over. It doesn't need to be highlighted or selected, and that's all I'm requiring you for this particular lab, is just have the cloth draped over the cube. All you have to do is submit a JPEG, a screenshot of this. Okay, so that's everything for the lab requirements. Be sure to mess around with it. This is a lot of fun, this lab, and I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next one. Thank you so much.